Here's the agonizing catch-22 that so many midlife women are quietly living in. You've been reading the articles, you've been listening to the experts and the influencers. You know that to protect your bones and your muscle mass and your metabolic health and your independence, that you must lift weights. You look at your own mother's path, the gradual shrinking, the loss of mobility, the fear of falling, and you've made up your mind, I bet, that will not be me. So you do your best. You try to get back to fitness. You pick up those dumbbells. You join the class. You try to build strength. And 2 days later, your back seizes. Your knee is throbbing or your neck is locked up so severely that you can't even sleep. You're caught in a terrifying, difficult trap. You're afraid of the consequences if you don't work out and lift weights, but you're afraid of crippling pain if you do. Today, we're going to break you out of that trap. That's my promise to you. Let's talk about how you get back to strength without paying for it with days of stiffness and pain. Welcome to the Somatic Strength Collective. I'm your host, Mandy Ryle, certified strength and conditioning specialist, pain care coach, and nervous system educator. This is a dedicated, compassionate space for midlife women who can hold up the sky, but feel like their bodies are falling apart. Together, we bridge clinical pain neuroscience, somatic movement education, and bone building strength. Chronic pain is not your destiny. Let's build a robust, reliable body and replace pain with peace. Let's begin. If you listen to episodes 1 and 2 in my podcast relaunch, you know that your body isn't broken and that somatic movement is how we update our brain's threat gating. So we can get back to movement without triggering those pain alarms. Now we come to the ultimate goal. Well, somatics feels really lovely and it can be a super affirmative practice to really get back to embodiment and addressing all of the fear that's been hanging over your head for so long. That's not the ultimate goal. So what is all this nervous system work actually for? It's so you can get back to your life, so that you can get back to being confident, so you can get back to loving how it feels to live in your body. And so that you can get strong, so that you can age well, so you can avoid all of those horrible consequences that we're seeing our parents live through now. So let's be honest about the stakes. In perimenopause and menopause, as you know, our estrogen levels decline. And you probably already know by now, unless you've been living under a rock, that estrogen isn't just a reproductive hormone. It is a primary driver for bone density, for muscle protein synthesis, and of course, insulin sensitivity. So because of this hormonal shift, midlife is the critical window, which is why so many of my clients come to me and they are practically panicking because they know there are things that they need to do to prevent all of these horrible consequences of aging. Their bodies just won't cooperate. So let's talk about these things that we really need to be aware of with regard to strength training, okay? So if we don't apply mechanical load to our bones, osteopenia and osteoporosis become inevitable. I am a body optimist. I really truly believe that people don't benefit when we scaremonger them in their bodies, but I'm afraid that this one is true. You must load your bones. Eating more calcium is not going to do it. Strength training, impact training is the only way to maintain the bone health that you really need for the future that you want to have. And then here, what is the other part of that is that sarcopenia that you've been hearing about. We naturally lose muscle mass every decade after the age of 30, unless we actively load our tissues. I think a lot of us have gotten the message that it's actually inevitable that you're just going to lose 3 to 8% of your muscle mass every decade, but that's not actually true. You can absolutely counteract, reverse, and gain muscle as you age with progressive overload, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. And then the final thing that a lot of my peers are confronting right now are the consequences related to metabolic health. This is sort of like a snowballing situation as we get older. So you may not be aware that muscle is actually our primary metabolic organ. Our primary metabolic organ. And that losing muscle directly impacts our energy, our systemic inflammation, which has a huge impact on pain. It influences our weight and our blood sugar regulation, which is directly correlated to our dementia and Alzheimer's risk. So if you already thought that strength training was important for your health, I hope that now you're really thinking, holy cow, not only is it important for living the kind of future that I want to live, it's actually important for preventing the kind of future that I do not want to have. You already know this probably, right? The fitness world, the influencers, they've been screaming at you every single day. You have to lift heavy. You have to do high intensity interval training during perimenopause. There's no excuses, right? Except that those influencers aren't speaking to you, a woman who is challenged by chronic pain. And that's why you're here. That's why I'm here. Because every time you read that messaging, a surge of panic hits you because you want to do it. You don't want to become dependent on your doctors or your family members down the road. You want to travel, you want to hike, you want to play with your future grandkids, you want to carry your own luggage and put it in the overhead compartment. And you want to live the life that you have really worked very hard to build. But when your primary experience of fitness over the last few years has been pain and flare-ups and frustration, just going to the gym is not the same for you. I'm validating that. It is not the same for you. And you know what a huge risk it is for you to try to pick up those weights. Sometimes you get away with it, sometimes you don't. So I want you to hear me clearly. Your barrier to having all of these wonderful benefits of resistance training is in a lack of discipline. Your barrier is that you've been given an all or nothing approach to strength. That your nervous system, as a woman with chronic pain, is rightly rejecting. So what do we do instead? That's what we're going to talk about. But before we talk about how to do this, I want to share something that medical research has made abundantly clear. Exercise is not just something that you earn the right to do once you're out of pain. Targeted exercise is the primary evidence-based treatment for chronic musculoskeletal pain. Most of the drugs and the procedures and the surgeries out there that are treating musculoskeletal pain would love to be as effective as general exercise. So when I say that it is essential for you to get back to exercise, I'm not just talking about once your pain is gone, I'm talking about now to get rid of your pain, okay? So when women come to me, they often believe that if they have knee osteoarthritis or they've got persistent lower back pain or shoulder tendinopathy or gluteal tendinopathy, which is all over the place right now, right? That they should wait until the pain completely disappears before they're okay to lift weights. Many major systematic reviews tell a completely different story. So look at this evidence across major musculoskeletal conditions. And if you know me, I'm going to pull you into the weeds with me for a second. We're going to talk about the evidence, but I'm going to make it easy to digest because this is important for you to know and also your friends. So a landmark Cochrane systematic review led by Hayden, evaluating over 240 randomized control trials, which is huge, by the way, showed that structured progressive exercise is significantly more effective than passive treatments or usual medical care at reducing both pain intensity and disability. Yeah. Structured progressive exercise. That doesn't necessarily mean doing the same physical therapy exercises that you got 5 years ago, right? It means that all of the massage and the TENS units and the chiropractic treatments, those are not as effective at all as exercise at reducing your pain and reducing your risk of disability due to your pain. And then let's talk specifically about osteoarthritis. So large-scale reviews, including another Cochrane review by Franson and colleagues, confirm that therapeutic exercise and strength training produce clear reductions in pain and substantial physical function improvements for knee and hip osteoarthritis. And these effects were comparable to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, but without the side effects. So what is this saying? That exercise works better than your ibuprofen and your Tylenol. And you don't have to deal with all of the consequences for your gut. Okay, here's another one. So I mentioned tendinopathy a moment ago. I know that a lot of women in perimenopause are getting fed by the algorithm information about gluteal tendinopathy, which I have definitely in my work with clients found is pretty common. That gluteal tendinopathy, the shoulder tendinopathies, the frozen shoulder business. So let's talk a little about exercise specifically for tendinopathies and rotator cuff pain. So here's some research by Dr. Peter Malarius and Jeremy Lewis, which demonstrates that tendons require progressive mechanical load to remodel tissue. These tendons, that gluteal tendon, your shoulder, I know it hurts and it seems like you need to rest it. You will only get worse. It will only become more painful and more limiting and more disabling. These injuries require progressive mechanical load to remodel tissue, to reduce pain, and of course, to increase capacity and restore your function. Rest only makes tendons more stiff and sensitive, whereas controlled loading heals them. A lot of times you can do this in physical therapy. However, a large number of my clients have tendinopathies. I myself have a tendinopathy, and often these are subclinical, which means that we can get better just with some smart loading. And then let's just talk about generalized chronic pain. So a comprehensive overview by Dr. Ganine, published in the Cochrane database of systematic reviews, found that exercise interventions consistently improve physical function and quality of life across persistent pain conditions, and they don't cause harm. Again, with medicine, we've been around long enough. We know there's no free lunch. There's always side effects. You always pay a price for every medication. With exercise, there's no side effects. If you want to call feeling better about how you fit into your clothes, having more energy, sleeping better, right? Having better metabolic health, not to mention digestive health, maybe losing a few pounds, a side effect, well, then I guess exercise has those side effects. So why does progressive exercise work so well? Because of a term that I introduced right at the beginning of this episode called progressive overload, which is the major rule that all of those people in the gym are following. But we can be smart about progressive overload. And as someone who's suffering from chronic pain, we really do need to be smart about it. It can actually be an important part of your healing. So progressive overload is simply the systematic increase of physical stress placed upon the body over time. And when applied correctly, progressive overload does two vital things. So when it comes to your tissues, your biology, it builds tissue tolerance, it stimulates collagen synthesis, it increases muscle cross-sectional area, which means your muscles are getting bigger, and mineralizes bone matrix, makes your bones stronger, right? So muscles get stronger, they get better, bigger, bones get stronger, They get more resilient, okay? And then there's another effect to progressive overload, which we think about a little bit less, but that's neurological. And that's what is especially important for you, my friend, as someone who's suffering from chronic pain, because progressive overload helps to desensitize a nervous system that has become hyperreactive. So by consistently exposing your nervous system to tiny, careful, well-considered incremental increases in resistance, you retrain your brain's threat detection algorithms. You teach the central nervous system, that mechanical load does not equal damage. So this is called the Somatic Strength podcast. And so, of course, for me, strength work has a somatic element, right? We talked about how somatics is really movement, exercise, if you will, for the nervous system specifically. So all of my programs incorporate that overarching value is that the nervous system rules. So you might be nodding your head thinking, wow, it sounds like not only should I be doing some strength training, but now I really want to. So how are you going to apply progressive overload without triggering a flare-up? That's the question I know that's coming next. And we do it through something called graded exposure. So graded exposure is the process of introducing physical resistance to your body in microdoses that sit just below your brain's threat threshold. Just below your brain's threat threshold. So the last time you went to the gym, do you think when you did your exercises that they were sitting just below your brain's threat threshold? If you're like most of my clients, they were either significantly below that threshold, which means that over time you will become more sensitive, or they were above the threat threshold, which means that over time you will become more sensitive. We've got a Goldilocks place here, my friend, because when you try to jump straight from some nice floor stretching into a 45-minute gym class, your hypervigilant nervous system is going to panic. It interprets the heavy weight and the high heart rate as a massive threat, and it deploys its most powerful defense mechanism, a severe pain flare-up. So graded exposure is the answer. It breaks that threat loop by manipulating movement variables like leverage, range of motion, speed, load, number of repetitions, fear, technique. So through graded exposure, my clients learn that loading their tissues is safe before we ask it to handle heavy resistance. So what does this look like in real life? If you're ready to start incorporating these two principles of progressive overload and graded exposure, let's start by considering the squat, which is a movement that many with knee or back pain rightly fear. However, the squat is an important one to consider because it is indeed an essential movement. It's required. You can't opt out of squatting if you're a human that wants to walk or stand or sit or use a toilet. So let's talk about how you can reclaim the squat using these two principles. You'd want to begin with some simple floor work that mimics the range of motion of a squat while safely supported by the ground. So like if we start way at the beginning, it would be pelvic tilts, right? And then eventually it would be some knee to chest work, maybe even working with the wall. We'd have to work on reclaiming flexion of both the knees and the pelvis and the spine, right? And then eventually we'd start to move to a more upright position. Depending on where you're starting, You might just want to do something really simple like a wall sit. Nobody likes wall sits, but they're really, really well tolerated by people with both knee and back pain. And they can absolutely do the exact same thing with regard to building strength and tissue tolerance. And then we might move to something that brings the squat more into the context of your life, but not into some of those more feared environments like a gym, for example. So just using a higher chair that you have around your house to practice sit to stand. And what I would recommend is initially use something that you can pull yourself up on. The goal isn't at this point to be building strength necessarily, and it's certainly not to boost your ego, because that does take a little bit of personal fortitude to need something to get up out of a chair. What it does, though, is a principle that I use with my clients called get to good. We need to teach the tissues that these movements are safe, that they're fun, that they don't hurt. And one way we do that, as I mentioned in the previous episode, is through repetition. Repetition teaches the nervous systems. And then ideally, you would move to an environment where you have some equipment. The leg press is your first piece of equipment that you're going to use to reclaim the squat. You don't need to do heavy leg presses, but we do need to start to feel that movement under load without necessarily loading the tissues where we already have some threat signaling. Okay. So I love the leg press for that. Seated leg press, reclining leg press. You know, I'm really lucky at the gym where I train my clients because we have access to a ton of different equipment because it's a bodybuilding gym, which can be a really intimidating environment for my clients who are a little bit out of shape to be, you know, working out next to people who train professionally. But what I love about that environment, and I would encourage you to seek out that kind of environment as well, is because they're bodybuilders, they need a million different ways to train every single muscle, which means you're going to have access to all kinds of cool equipment that's great for you if you have pain conditions that you need to work around. So my favorite piece of equipment for squats is the pendulum power squat. I promise I'm not endorsing them and getting paid for it. I just love that piece of equipment for my clients. So if you're thinking, okay, if I want to do a squat at the gym, I need to use dumbbells or a barbell, you absolutely do not. Look for a commercial gym that has all kinds of different equipment so that you can feel super, super stable when you're training these movements that you've had issues with. So whether it be the leg press, something like a pendulum power squat, a hack squat, and those pieces of equipment can allow you to progressively overload. Add a few reps every week to your sets. Add a little bit of weight occasionally until you're feeling pretty strong and you're not afraid of the movement anymore. You're no longer afraid. And then pretty soon, even though you may never have had a barbell on your back, right? You're going to notice that you're going upstairs and it's not nearly so much effort and it doesn't hurt your knees anymore. You're noticing that you're not hesitating to say yes if your friends want to go for a hike. Your body just naturally adapts to this more confident state of being. You have really embodied this strength. So bit by bit, through progressive overload and graded exposure, we systematically expand your envelope of function. We replace all of that fear with joy, with the joy of feeling capable. So this makes me think about a client that I still have. We'll call her Margot. And Margot is a busy attorney. She is a pillar of her church community and very busy in that community. And she's a mom of 2 adult kids. And her back and her shoulders and her neck and her knees were making her miserable. She was having a terrible time sleeping. It was hard to stay productive at work. She'd given up on physical activity, believe me. There was really nothing that she could do activity-wise that wouldn't make her miserable for hours and days later. And she was looking at a new type 2 diabetes diagnosis. And because she is just this really firecracker of a lady, she said, no, we're done going down this path. And so she began, like most of my clients, with nervous system regulation, awareness practice, and over several months, she identified some somatic practices that were really special to her and seemed to be very effective at keeping pain on the back burner. Her posture improved. Oh my gosh, guys. I don't work on posture because I believe that we can be comfortable and pain-free in any posture. However, oh my goodness, her posture improved. This woman couldn't even lay flat because her head wouldn't reach the floor. And now she does that really comfortably, which opens up a lot of possibilities for her just in terms of being more comfortable in life. And she was able to get through the workday without being in agony and totally exhausted from pain. But she also knew how important strength work was for her, at least metabolically. So we got to work. She committed to a habit of doing a 20 to 25 minute full body workout every day. And she chose that. Okay. She said, look, if I don't do it every day, I won't be consistent. So I'm telling you this so you know there are a million different ways to incorporate strength training into your life. Maybe you go to the gym a couple times a week. Maybe you do a 15-minute workout once a day, right? Anything in between. So at first her workouts were super, super simple because pain was still kind of nipping at her heels. So we were doing body weight, mobility work, and we had to be really creative with those exercises to load her knees, especially without flaring pain. So if you're thinking, I can't do that, my knees won't let me, I'm sorry. I support you and validate you, but that is not an excuse, I promise. Even from home, you can load your knees and not make them worse and actually get better. And then gradually she started adding bands, she started adding dumbbells and then heavier dumbbells. For her birthdays and Christmas over the last couple years, she has exclusively gotten workout equipment from home, from her family. That's what she's wanting. And they're super proud of her. And she's lost a significant amount of weight. Her blood sugar, by the way, is normal. She's not dosing insulin. Her pain is minimal. And even just working out at home with bands and dumbbells and body weight, she's gained 4 pounds of muscle. That is huge for a woman in her early 60s. She no longer feels limited by a body that had felt like a minefield. She couldn't take a single step without getting blown up, okay? And she's really proud of her physique. Just because we're getting older, that doesn't mean we can't be proud of how our bodies look. And of course, that's not the primary reason that we do this, but gosh, what a wonderful payoff. So again, strength is not about fitting into a smaller size of jeans or proving how hard you can push yourself. Strength is a ticket to autonomy. It's a ticket to the health span that we deserve. We have worked so hard in our lives, ladies. We deserve a health span that allows us to do all the things we've always dreamt of doing once our kids were out of the house, once we retire, which for a lot of us is still really far off, but we need to plant those seeds now. Because strength training is how you ensure that at 60, 70, and 80, you're still traveling. You're still lifting your own groceries. You're still getting down to the floor and getting back up with ease. And you're never having to ask anyone for permission to live your life. You do not have to accept fragility as your fate. I promise you do not have to settle for a shrinking life. And you don't have to suffer through flare-ups to get strong. So before we finish today, I'd love to leave you with one simple next step, okay? Hopefully you're thinking, okay, I'm ready. I understand that this is the next step, not just to feel less pain, but to age well. I deserve it. I'm worth it, okay? So here's your next step. Over the years, I've worked with hundreds of women who were convinced their bodies were just breaking down. Okay. Women who couldn't bend over to tie their shoes without bracing for pain, or maybe had a flare up because they pulled their boot on wrong. Okay. Women who winced every time they reached into the back seat of their car. And like a lot of you, they had stopped hiking and gardening and traveling and exercising because they didn't trust their body. And a lot of these women had done every single thing they were told to do. They followed all the rules, to quote a client that I just spoke with yesterday. She's followed all the rules. Why is she still in so much pain? And you've probably done that too, right? You've been doing the stretching and the pillows and the mattresses and the supplements, and you've seen every specialist and every practitioner, and you've spent a fortune. And each time you pinned your hopes on the fact that this is going to be the thing that fixed it. And it hasn't been. And a lot of these women, those same women, they're lifting weights they never imagined possible again. They're saying yes to trips with their friends with no hesitation. They're on the floor and up again with their grandkids. They're playing sports. They're getting back to activities that they thought were gone. Not because we found a magical exercise from an influencer on Instagram or TikTok, but because we finally understood what their body had been asking for all along. And that's why I created the neural audit. So the neural audit is a free 2-minute assessment. It helps you understand where your nervous system may be currently, from the earliest signs that your body is asking for support all the way through more persistent patterns of protection, which is, by the way, where most people land on my audit. So if you're like, gosh, I think I might be too far gone. Like, I don't see how this could help me because I've already tried all the things and I'm in so much pain all the time. Like, this is for somebody who's just has a little niggle of an ache here and there. That is not true. The majority of the women who take my quiz end up in the most persistent, severe patterns of protection. And what this audit will do is it helps you understand what your next step should be. So for example, if you find yourself in the management trap or the neural crisis stage, don't worry. I'm not going to leave you wondering what to do. Remember, this is what I do all day, every day. I know what the next step is for you. So I'm going to point you towards some of my favorite free resources that are going to help you begin moving your body in a way that feels safe and supportive and realistic right the second you complete that quiz. I'm going to send those over your way. So you'll find the link in the show notes, and I really encourage you to please do it now. It takes 2 minutes, 3 tops, okay? Because clarity is often the first step toward change. Remember, my goal here is to empower you. You need to know where you sit right now. And after taking that audit, if you're ready for more support, I would love to invite you to come and experience the Somatic Strength Collective, which is my app-based membership. And it's where we take all of the stuff we've been talking about in these first few episodes and we put it into practice together. It's where I hold your hand and I walk you through these things. And inside the collective, you're going to find guided somatic movement sessions, strength training, designed specifically for women in midlife with specific pain conditions. You're going to find nervous system education, pain science education. The place that I always tell people to start right at the beginning is with one of my 12-week programs. So I have a 12-week program for knee pain, back pain, and hip pain. And that's going to take you from day one, my nervous system is out of control, all the way to, oh my gosh, I'm working out 4 days a week from home. That's a really great option if you struggle with accountability, because it's going to deliver that quick little lesson to you every single day. You never have to question what's on my calendar. It's all right there. It guides you through every step of the way. And if you ever have any trouble, you just lean on the supportive community of women who are in the collective with you. They're also trying to understand their pain issues, and they know what you're going through. And of course, I also show up in the community as well to offer help. So the best part is you don't have to decide today whether the Somatic Strength Collective app is right for you. You can explore it with a free 7-day trial and you just see how it feels. You could start one of the programs and do the first week and say, okay, I think I can fit this in, or it's not the right time. If it works for you, you keep it. If it's not, you just cancel. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm grateful you're taking the time to better understand your body. So until next time, remember, you are strong, you are stable, and you are infinitely adaptable.